Now, I'm hoping that you all came to this session today to see us make some maps. And in order to do so, we are going to need a theme. And what better place to look for inspiration than by taking a blast to the past? So, let's time travel. Back to medieval England. Now, the medieval times were fascinating. They were gruesome and treacherous, but from an architectural point of view, they were also beautiful and castle-filled. So why not map castle distribution? We can see where these monuments are still standing, learn more about them, and all without the need for a time turner. So in order to do some map making, we're going to need to come back to the digital age and have our data. As you saw in the opening plenary, the ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World is a phenomenal resource at our fingertips. And for our first demo, we will be using data from the Living Atlas and contributors with Historic England in order to be building our map. So with that, let's jump into the first demo. Now, with this map, I wanted to embrace the medieval theme, starting with the base map. Regardless of if you're taking a base map from the Living Atlas or if you're bringing in your own layers, each can be built on top of one another, and using the blend tool, you're able to allow these layers to interact with one another, to combine your favorite features from each in order to create one that's best suited for your needs. In this case, the labels, detailing, and color from the human geography base maps, coupled with some various paper textures, allow us to create a map that really replicates what an old, well-loved European map may have looked like. And while having a papyrus map may not be suited to your organization's needs, these tools can be applied more practically as well to create on-brand base maps tailored to your data, to follow regulations, or to even set a local projection. Now, customization is not just reserved for base maps and can be taken further within your data itself and data visualization. For example, these castle points can be taken further from the default, adjusting for things like size, rotation, which might be a little bit more helpful if they weren't circles, and things like fill color or the fill transparency. If you wanted your data to be more representative of what it's showing, you could also upload your own JPEG or PNG. And now that we have these castles and we know where they're located, I'd like to know a little bit more about how this data can interact with one another so that we can really begin to make some meaning. And this is where, with our data layers, you can also build them up to add additional insights into your map. Here, we're able to use a heat map to begin to see where this castle distribution lies. The points with higher degrees of yellow are where more of our castles are, and then the darker red is where there are fewer. With this, we're able to not only see the significance in this data, but we're able to highlight that data visualization does not have to be monotonous. If we go into our heat map and the customization available, we can see that not only could it fit the scheme that we have going here, such as looking like scorched parchment for this medieval map, but you can also begin to make choices to make your maps more inclusive, such as making or picking a ramp that is colorblind friendly. And now that we've talked a little bit more about the styling aspect, let's jump into taking advantage of the dynamic nature of being in Map Viewer and going into scale. If we go into our castle properties, we can limit the visual range of this map so that we can focus in on the heat map. In doing so, we're able to target and have a more controlled visual hierarchy, but we're also able to declutter some of the map. And now, if we want to zoom into an area of interest, we can begin to talk about one of my favorite things, which is the power of a pop-up. Pop-ups allow you to have some added context to any additional area. And with these clicking of focusing in on an area of interest, you're able to gather some additional engagement as well. And with a little bit of help from Arcade and HTML, you're able to take a pop-up, which looks like this, our default, our one-stop shop for all of your attributes, into something like this. And I can begin to take you through how I went about this as well. Along the top, you can see that we have a variety of different ways that you can customize your text and the style, but then you can pull in data dynamically by the use of curly brackets so that we can begin to say what kind of grade castle each one is. If you'd like to configure your own expression, you can do so using Arcade to begin to make meaning of each of these data points, such as if we know this is a grade 1 castle, we can begin to explain what each of these grades mean. And if we take a look at how you'd go about building this in the Arcade interface, you can see that it's as simple as defining a few variables with various strings and then using a when statement to pull it in depending upon the grade given to each castle. And finally, going into our HTML for a bit more of the aesthetic side of things, all you need is a bit of HTML lingo, knowing where the background is and the hex color you'd like to prescribe it. And with that, you're able to go in and show these various color schemes to match your map. Now, I only have a few minutes left, and I'd like to end on a bit more of a bang. So how many of you have heard of sketch layers? Show of hands. Oh, Balqis, thank goodness. Well, buckle up, I'm about to tell you a bit more. So sketch layers are one way to have a few practical applications. You can create polygons, you can create notes of interest using the text attributes as well. However, you can also use this to embed yourself within the times and use these various vector stickers or stamps in a sense. So in this case, I've taken a handful of sheep, some ships, and even a token rooster to really settle us into this ye olde map. But I think that with the fiery undertones that we've been given and the snacks off to the side, that we're missing a final animal. So, before we close up and pass this over to Balqis, I want to test this text annotation feature. I think that it might need a font to match our aesthetic. And finally, we can take a step back, admire our work, and pass it over to Balqis before the flames engulf my parchment.
All right, thank you, Eve. Now we're going to be bringing our castles theme over to ArcGIS Pro, where we will be mapping the castles of King Edward I to create a display print map. Now, if I were to use all the default settings within ArcGIS Pro, the resulting map may look like this. However, we're here to go and explore the options beyond the default and to actually have some fun with our map making. So instead, I created this map, which I believe is a bit more fun looking than the last one. Now, I won't be able to go over all of the steps that I took to create this map with you in today's session. However, I will be sharing some tips and techniques so you too can create your own medieval style map. Now, to help make my map, I use these 5 ArcGIS Pro styles created by our friends over at Esri UK. Styles store a wide range of color schemes, symbology, and labels, and you can find and download a wide variety of them at this website here. Now, to get your style into ArcGIS Pro, simply open up your project, go to the catalog pane, and identify the styles folder. Right-click, and all that's left to do is add your style. As you can see here, I have already pre-uploaded all the styles that I will be using today. Now let's focus on our map view. We can see here that I have a larger polygon, which will be acting as the background of my layout, and this is demonstrated in this layout view here. You also may have noticed I have a group called Fill with multiple polygons of whales. And you're probably asking yourself, why on earth has she done this? For today's session, I will be mixing and matching different symbologies from different styles, and each layer will have a different style applied to it and a specific blending mode. So let's go ahead and add a parchment texture to my background. I will be using the paper background texture from the sketch style right here. And let's zoom in a bit. And if we go into Properties and then the Layers tab, you can see the different components that make up this particular fill. We have the texture and we have the tint, and we're able to turn these different components on and off. And this gives us the flexibility to customize these styles even further. For example, I am going to be increasing the size of my texture and adjust the tint color using a specific hex code. And what I'm doing is changing the color from a yellowy shade to something a bit more orangey. And let's hit apply. Okay, for my next layer, I will be using the riverbank symbology from the Physical Geography Atlas style. And if we zoom in to the edge here, you can see that it has this really lovely stippling effect that radiates out from the polygon into the sea. Now, I don't really care for the fill itself, I just want this stippling effect. Like earlier, we could go into Properties and turn off the components that we don't want within the layers, but we can actually delete these components from the symbology itself, and we do this by going into Structure. And as I'm deleting the components, you can see that the preview section on the bottom right-hand side is being updated. And now we're left with the actual stippling effect. But it's quite close to the outer edge of the polygon. I really want to dramatize this and have it radiate out a bit more. And if we go into the structure, you can see that this effect is created by two components. Now, I don't know how well this is coming up on the big screen, but this effect is of smaller dots in a lighter color, while this component is of larger dots in a darker color. To enhance the effect, let's duplicate both these layers and go back into the Layers tab. And like earlier, we can further customize each one of the components, like adjusting the color, the size, the offset, and even the drawing mode. Now, I've only updated one out of the 4 components, but once all 4 have been customized, the resulting effect looks like this. Another thing I'd like to point out is, as I zoom out, you can see that the effect changes size. Now, this would be a really useful feature if I were creating a web map. However, since I'm making a print map, this is kind of really annoying. So we can go ahead and set a display reference scale. And we do this by opening up the map properties and selecting the scale we want to freeze our symbology at. Then we go to our layer, display, and select this option, scale symbols when a reference scale is set. And as I'm zooming in and out, you can see that the effect is now consistent. For the fill, I will be using 2 layers. One using the same symbology as our background, the sketch style, and I will be using a watercolor style as well. And I'll be combining the 2 using a layer blend, specifically the color burn. And as Yves mentioned earlier, layer blends are a great way of visualizing and combining different layers together in an interesting way. Finally, I have an outline of whales done in this inky texture using the field notes style. Now, I'd like to really emphasize that I achieved my desired look just by using the tools already available to me. I didn't have to go out and create my own stippling effect or textures. So it's really worth just sitting down, mixing and matching different styles, and combining them with a wide variety of blending modes, and again, customizing them further, going beyond the default. So now I'm pretty happy with my base map. We can begin to populate our map with our castle locations. I have used my own icons for the castle points, and I will be using the linear burn blending mode so the texture of the paper comes through, so it looks like these icons have been drawn on. Now, I would like to actually label my castles, and I can do this using the inbuilt labeling tool within ArcGIS Pro. And using this tool, I can import fonts, adjust the size, the color, and select the label placements. However, I'd like to actually curve the label itself around my icons to achieve that handwritten effect we see in old maps. And we can do this using annotation layers. To create an annotation layer, simply right-click on the layer you wish to label, select Convert Label, and convert labels to annotations. Now this will open up a geoprocessing pane where you can create your annotation layer. And this is a layer I have created earlier. We can then go ahead and go into Edit and select Create Feature, much like you can do with a feature class. But instead of creating a point line or polygon, we're actually creating a text feature. So let's go ahead and specify the text. Get your desired font size and color, and I will be using this curved annotation tool. Simply draw out your curve, and there we go, we've created our label. And again, much like feature layers, we can move the label, rescale, and rotate them, giving us that extra flexibility and control on where we want to add our labels within our map. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this for now, as I have already prepared the annotations of castles and the local geography during the time of King Edward I. Now I'm feeling really happy with my map. Let's head over to the layout view. Now with layouts, you can get really creative with the different aspects you're adding around your map. For example, I have added informational text as background information to my mapping subject. And sticking with the theme, I have used a black letter font found in 13th and 14th century manuscripts. I have also added a floor plan of Harlock Castle, again to provide further context on why these structures are so spectacular. And I got this data from the OS Master Map base map. All I did was a rough digitization over it, and then for the symbology, I used the same techniques as earlier, mixing and matching different symbologies and customizing them further, and using the annotation layers as my labels. And as a final touch, I've added a border in the style of 13th century manuscripts. Now, I hope this session has given you some inspiration on how you can really put your cartography through its paces. If you're interested in any of the maps Eve and I have created today, there will be submissions to the Esri UK map gallery following on from this conference. And Eve and I would just both like to say thank you for listening and happy map making.